Welcome back to HPP, the podcast that talks with tomorrow's hoop stars. I am Rich Harris, and thank you for joining us again. Today, I'm joined by Jake Kopstick, my cohort, diehard college basketball fan. Jake and I, this is how we bond with college basketball. This episode, so much time and effort went into it because we're covering I don't know how many conferences. It's like 20, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Or close to it. And we're going to do it all, shotgun fashion. But at the same time, in order to get to that point, in order to speak intelligently about these conferences, even though we're not going to talk a lot about one individual conference, a ton of time went into this. And this is really an episode for diehard college basketball fans, which is why Jake is the only person to show up alongside me. But before I ask you how you're doing, Jake, I want to just announce that along with this episode, we had a longer than expected break to get this episode ready. And we also had 3 interviews, which are going to be in a separate episode. They'll both be released this week. And those 3 interviews were with all the members of the conferences we're going to be speaking about today. And that was Northern Colorado's head coach, Steve Smiley, Keon Williams, a wing from Abilene Christian, who just transferred from Oklahoma State, and Kamani Hamilton, a forward from High Point. And he played at High Point last year, but the year before that, he played at Mississippi State. Both of those guys are former 4-star recruits. So, and today's topic is going to be basically the conferences, the mid-majors that are one bid conferences. Basically, we're expecting them to be one bid because of the way history plays out and the way the conferences are laying out. But before we jump into that, I want to ask Jake how he's doing. How you doing, Jake?
I'm good. I'm busy. I'm working with Temple Volleyball, and they're going to start playing Friday. We have 4 games in 3 days, so I'm going to be living at Pearson McGonigal Hall, where John Chaney used to take the sidelines. So, going to start the heat up here. But look, I work a lot. I'll sleep deprive myself as long as it's for college basketball. So, okay with that. Excited to talk about these conferences. This is the stuff for sickos. So if you like these conferences, then you got a friend in me.
Well,
I think about the season every day, man. I need it. I just want games. I don't care if it's Queens and Wofford, because I'm looking at a page right now. Like, just give me something. Just give me something.
Well, the thing of it is, though, there are a lot of people who do care about these conferences, and they don't get talked about except for maybe in their local paper or their student newspaper. So I think we're probably one of the few, podcasts out there that are going to be talking about these conferences, but a lot of people do care. For example, Grand Canyon has a 7,000 plus arena that they jam pack every home game. And, so there's plenty of fans out there to support these teams. One thing I want to say is, please do not sue us if we get it wrong about how many players are returning for each team, because not all the official rosters are yet posted. So in some cases, we had to take educated guesses, but I'm pretty sure we're within 1, maybe 2 off for any one given team. But we think we got it right. Very careful about this stuff. So, all right. So we're going to begin. The first conference is the American East Conference, which last year, the regular season winner was Vermont, and Vermont went to the tourney. I know you really like Vermont, Jake. You mentioned that to me before I even, dove into this conference. I see 2 other teams that could possibly make a move personally. And that would be, and I'm going to draw a blank.
Bryant's got to be one of them.
Bryant and UMass Lowell, which, got 2 transfers, former, 4-star guys, Ja'Kai Robinson from Miami of Florida and Favor Ari from Penn State, who's the center. Neither of these guys have gotten much playing time, to date. Robinson, I believe, I think they're both been at their schools for 2 years. Or Ari might have started Notre Dame.
He was at Penn State first. His first year at Penn State was last year.
Right. So he was at Notre Dame the first year, but he's hardly played. Neither of them hardly played. So we don't know what we're getting there. But Bryant, has been kind of on the heels of Vermont for what, like the last 3 years, especially since they got Earl Timberlake. But this year, I have to agree with you that I kind of like Vermont because they're returning so many guys, 6 of their top. And when we're going to keep on saying this number, we looked at who played the most minutes last year. We looked at their regular rotation, whether it went 7, 8, 9, 10 deep, whatever. And Vermont, of their 9 top players in the rotation, 6 of them are returning. Bryant only returns 3 of 7. And Lowell returns, I believe, also 3 of 7. But they too get a nice recruit, Caleb Murphy, he was, I believe, a top 60 recruit back in the day, and he started with South Florida, now with DePaul, and now he's going to try his luck at UMass Lowell. So yeah, what are your thoughts here, Jake?
So yeah, look at Vermont. And here's the thing: we're going to talk about Colgate too, and I'm probably going to give the same spiel about Colgate. In conference play, Rich, any idea what Vermont's record is the last 3 years? Just on a whim. I know it's like
I would say they probably have lost less than 6 games.
They've lost 4. They are 46-4 the last 3 years in conference. I'm not going to go against this team. And they bring a lot back. I'm not going to be the guy that's like Nick Wright yapping or Max Kellerman yapping about how Tom Brady was washed. He's going to fall off a cliff. One day you'll be right. I don't want to wait for that. I don't want to be that guy. Right. So we see who they bring back: Shamir Bogues, TJ Long, TJ Hurley, Io Filet coming back. Really good defensive big man. That sells me.
Yeah.
You bring back those guys. Now they do lose Aaron Deloney, but there's still plenty here to guys who scored a lot, getting a year older. There's still plenty of talent here. Good defensive big. Bring back 3 guards. They've won this conference and represented the America East in the tournament the last 3 seasons. 6 tournaments under John Becker. They've yet to win a game in the tournament.
Yeah.
They've got there 6 times in the last 3 years. So, yeah, I'm going to roll Vermont. I think Earl Timberlake is the player of the year. He'll score a bunch, just as he did last season. And I do like Bryant and the thing is, Bryant was a bit rocky last year. Obviously, Jared Grasso, with his police incident, he steps down. He's now at a high school. I think he's at a prep school now, a high school or prep school basketball coach, bringing in a ton of talent, as he did. I mean, some of these teams were really, really loaded, and they had Doug Eder and fun names like that. But they'll be competitive. Bryant will with Rafael Pinzone. I think Barry Evans is a nice transfer here. As a wing, you could shoot a bit from St. Bonaventure, and then of course Earl Timberlake as well. So like what Bryant's doing. I'm from the Philly area, big Five fan. There's quite the Big Five flair here because Ryan Daly, who used to be a star at St. Joe's, he's now an assistant coach on this Bryant team. And of course, if you know anything about Philadelphia hoops, the name Phil Martelli rings a bell. His son Phil Jr., after being the interim last year, now got a deal to remove that interim tag and be the head guy. So I think it's a 2-horse race here. UMass Lowell can certainly get there as well. They've been knocking on the door, it seems, the last couple of years. But I'm going to roll here, Vermont. Kind of hard not to.
Yeah.
Kind of hard not to.
I mean, these 3 teams that we're talking about are the 3 teams that return a first-team all-conference player. Bogues with Vermont, Max Brooks, who's a forward for UMass Lowell, and Timberlake. And, in terms of pro prospects, Timberlake was like the number 34 recruit when he started at Miami of Florida. And the thing that has haunted him his whole career has been shooting. If this kid has the body and he can do so many things, but the one thing he can't do is knock down a three. And that, but if somehow he turns that around this year, he might get drafted.
Been in college a while too. Certainly has a lot of game reps under.
Yeah, this will be his fifth and final year. All right. So we both like Vermont. We both like Timberlake for Player of the Year. So no disagreements so far. We'll move on to the ASUN, and that was a conference that Eastern Kentucky was our preseason pick. We talked about them in the you and I talked about them in the preseason. Thought they would dominate this conference. They did win it, but they didn't necessarily dominate. And then in the conference tourney, Stetson, upset, Eastern Kentucky and was the team to make it into the tournament. So, and they also have Conference Player of the Year, Jalen Blackman, who has transferred to Miami of Florida. So, what you'll find, I said this to Coach Smiley when we talked. I said, I don't think I've ever seen a year where the mid-majors have been so poached. I mean, and it works up in levels. If you're in the A10, you get poached by the ACC, and if you're in the ASUN, you get poached by maybe the A10. You know what I'm saying? It's all climbing up in levels. But the bottom, these conferences we're talking about today, I mean, some of these conferences were loaded last year, and there's hardly anything. I mean, it's like hard to find a Player of the Year because not much left. But all right, so in terms of top players returning, Eastern Kentucky only returns 2 of 8. Lipscomb returns 4 of 8. Plus they also poached I don't know how you say Mr. Powell's first name. Is that Giassi? Giassi?
For what team?
For Jacksonville. The reason why I mentioned him is because he was one of their rotational players that they lost. So it's kind of like, Lipscomb didn't lose one player and, they played significant minutes. They also get back, and this name's also going to challenge me, Jacob
Ognasovich.
Thank you. He was a guard who starred for Lipscomb 2 years ago, but last year he sat out the whole year with injury. He is a Player of the Year candidate, I think, if he can return to form. Stetson only returns 2 of 8. Jacksonville 5 of 8. Austin P 4 of 8. And by the way, side note, there's been more shuffling of conferences this year. So former Division II powerhouse West Georgia joins this conference, and they replace Kennesaw State, which is moving to Conference USA. So to me, the top newcomers in this conference would be Stetson wing Abramiko Kanika, who was highly regarded coming out of Europe. He's Italian, and he started with UCLA, didn't see much playing time, went to Wake, started to get more playing time. That didn't happen there either. So now he's at Stetson. Eastern Kentucky gets Mayer Wool from Charleston, a pretty high recruit who didn't get much playing time for Charleston. And lastly, a player from a starter for Columbia, Xavier McLean. He goes to Florida Gulf Coast. And if you remember last year, we also touted Florida Gulf Coast because they had so many players returning, and they were a big disappointment. They were like in the middle of this conference. So as you can see, there's really no team that's returning a great number of starters. What are you thinking here, Jake?
I'm going to roll with Lipscomb here. I have been a Lipscomb fan for a couple of years in Lenny Acuff's team. This team last year, one of the best 3-point shooting teams in America. They put up a lot of points. And they had a game last year. They took Arkansas to the wire. I think that game was in Birmingham. But they had a neutral site game against Arkansas where they had a shot to win it at the end. I think they had 2 shots to win it at the end, actually. So even with the loss of Darren Boyd, who it's a shame that he tore that ACL and had to miss the latter half of the season or latter third of the season. but still a lot of talent here. I still think they will shoot well, and I think getting Ognacevic back is going to be massive to have another big and another four who can really, really score. So I went back and forth between my player of the year. I was thinking Will Pruitt. I decided to land on Jacob Ognacevic. Really good shooting team. And, with a lot of shooting around him, kickouts, maybe some one-on-one in the post. I think this is a guy that's going to thrive a lot, even with the year off from injury. So I'm going to go Lipscomb. And in his first year back, Ognacevic is going to win player of the year and surprise everybody.
Right. And, just by the sheer numbers, they're bringing back 4 of their 8 guys. You add Powell from Jacksonville, who was a regular rotational player, and then you add Ognacevic. That's a star player. So, that's looking pretty good right there. So I have to agree with you. And the player of the year I like is Robert McCray. And McCray last year, he actually started off at Wake Forest. Didn't get a lot of playing time. Sophomore year, he redshirted. Then last year, he came and he played 31 minutes per game, put up 18.4 points per game, shot 50% from the field, or 36% from 3, 72 from the line. Also produced other numbers, 4.2 rebounds, 2.9 assists, 1.3 steals. So, a nice handy guard that can do just about everything, and is not really bad at anything. So he's 6'4". I think he has, some pro potential. He's on our draft board. And he's only in his 3rd year, so he's still got more room for growth. So yeah, I'm going McCray, and I agree with you about Lipscomb. All right, so we'll move on to the Big Sky. Of course, as I said, we talked to Northern Colorado's head coach, and that will be in the other show this week. But last year it was a 4-team race, and 4 teams that kind of really stood out and really looked good. 3 of them had star players. Pro potential. One was Weber with Dylan Jones, who was a 1st-round draft pick, Cedric Coward at Eastern Washington, and of course St. Thomas with Northern Colorado. And you had this 4-team race all season long, and none of them went to the Big Dance. They all lost to Montana State in the tournament, who also had a really good player in Robert Ford, who's moved on to graduation. So this is one of those teams I was talking about that had a lot of talent last year, and boy, was it picked over by the Vultures. The only returner in terms of first team in this conference, don't ask me why, they picked 7 first-team all-conference players. And the only one returning is Trenton McLaughlin. And if you look at his numbers, you're like, wow, that's pretty bad that he's first-teamer. But, if you just took the top 5 in this conference, it would look very respectable. It would look very good. But for some reason, they pick 7, and then they water it down and kind of make it, I don't get that. Anyway, and when we look at these teams, Eastern Washington, of course, was the regular season champion. Northern Colorado and Montana tied for 2nd, and then Weber was in 4th. Not many of these teams return a lot. Eastern Washington, 1 of 9 of their top players. Northern Colorado, 5 of 9. Montana, 2 of 9. Montana State, the team that slipped in there last year, returned 7 of 8. Idaho returned 6 of 10. And you know what? I didn't look at Weber. I overlooked Weber. I have no idea how many Weber.
Well, they're two leading scorers. Obviously, Dylan Jones, but Steven Verplanken are gone as well. So there's 32 points down the drain. That's their top 2 leading scorers from last year.
Right. They bring back 4 of 8, but it's more the lower end of the rotation guys than the top guys. So, what do you got here? I mean, this is a conference that had like 3-4 player of the year candidates last year, and kind of a clear cut. Well, I mean, personally, I thought it was going to come down to Eastern Washington and Weber, and you couldn't have convinced me any different in the preseason. What are you thinking this year, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, last year seemed like it was definitely Eastern Washington. It was definitely Weber State. We did have Dylan Jones on last year. But Montana State, like very quietly, it's almost like they're approaching a like a not look, Colgate and Vermont are clearly outliers, but like, hey, they went through a coaching change. They still got in the tournament. And then they went there, Danny Sprinkles last 2 years. So, and Matt Logie's a local guy to PA too, so shout out to him. But I do think this team still has enough to be competitive and potentially win. Uh, However, my player of the year is going to come from a different team. It's going to come from Weber State. I think Montana State is going to win again. Blaze Threat, point guard for Weber State, I think is going to be my player of the year. A lot of money on the table as far as who's going to have the ball in their hands. Stephen Berplankin's gone. Dylan Jones is gone, who could do it all. I think Blaze Threat, that's where he steps in. Could probably shoot the ball a little bit better. Had a really good year shooting the 3-ball last year, coming from D2 Colorado Mesa, but I think he picks it up a little bit. And with all those touches and with all that usage to go around that's now vacated, I think he's that guy that steps in there along with Miguel Tomley. But I do think it's Blaze Threat who sees like a really, really big uptick in usage. He'll shoot a lot more. Who knows if it'll go up or down, but this is a really good 3-point shooter. But point-wise and usage-wise, I think this is the guy that kind of explodes a little bit. So I'm going to go Blaze Threat as my player of the year. But for the 4th straight year, Rich, I think it's going to be Montana State that represents the Big Sky in the tournament.
Yeah,
Look at everything that was lost. Like it's just crazy. It's like,
but I mean, this year they're bringing
so much.
This year they're bringing just about everybody back but Ford. I mean, he was their star player, but I mean, he was a little point guard. So, I mean, it's not like you're replacing Zach Edey. That's what I'm saying. Ford was like a 5'10" point guard. So I think he's a lot easier to replace than, some kind of dominating big. I mean, we haven't really talked much about coaching changes because most of the teams we have talked about to this point have had the same coaches. But Eastern Washington, not only do they lose everybody, but the reason they lost everybody is because Dave Riley, their head coach, left for Washington State, and he took about 6 players with him, including Cedric Coward, their star player. And he's replaced by Dan Monson. So, yeah, I gotta, with all the returning players, there's not a lot of incoming talent in this conference, like to talk about, like transfers, at least in terms of star caliber players. So all we can do is look at who's returning. Though I will say that Montana State does add 2 guys that could be contributors, and one is Jabe Mullins, a former Washington State player, a former St. Mary's player, a very good shooting guard with good size. He's about 6'5", 6'6". He really hasn't. Last year, I think was his best season. I'm gonna have to look with Washington State. It's kind of ironic he comes from Washington State, by the way, because all the other Eastern Washington players are. Oh no, I'm getting mixed up. He's coming to Montana State. All right. So anyway, last year he had a pretty dismal year, but when he played regular minutes the year before, he shot 44% from the field, 43 from deep, 87 from the free throw line. Those numbers went. He was miserable. Didn't play a complete season. Didn't get a single start. But this guy is a former 4-star. He started off at St. Mary's, then moved to Washington State. I know it's a gamble. I know it's a reach to go with Jay Mullins, who had a horrendous year last year, but that's who I'm going with. Another player who's joining Montana State, in addition to all the guys they're bringing back, and let me scroll down here. And I think it's Roosevelt Wheeler, right? Oh, no. It's Max. How do you say this guy's name?
Akbad-Polo.
Oh, yeah. Max Agboad-Polo. God, that name's a mouthful. Of course, he was a top 50 recruit, and this guy has never, he's either hurt or he doesn't play. What are your thoughts here? Any chance he turns it around in his final year?
I mean, he was where? He was at Wyoming, and then he was somewhere.
He was at Utah State last year. That's the other
Yeah,
thing. I think the last two schools he's been at, he hasn't even finished the season.
yeah, yeah. I do believe he left early last year. So I mean, it's an upside play, but no, I was looking at that too and was like, well, I still think they can be good even if he doesn't play a ton. Like, I don't think the season like hinges on Akbon Polo. Like, I think you'll take a shot on a fifth year with like that pedigree, but I, it's kind of hard to expect much from him. But I do think he'll be, like I like lengthwise, like there's an athlete that's like really advanced and like it is a big time athlete for this conference, but this team's good enough to win anyway, whether he's a massive contributor or not.
All right. You kind of cringed when I said Jay Mullins is player of the year. You think I'm going way too far out on a limb?
No, no. You pick who you want. I'm not gonna tell you what to do. I just think Blaze Threat's gonna see the ball a ton and have put up the type numbers
Yeah,
to get.
yeah, you're right. And you don't know how Mullins is going to fit in. I'm just thinking, pedigree, he's got it. He has proven that he can definitely score. It's just a matter of getting the minutes and getting the shots. My second choice would have been Julius Mims of Idaho. Real athletic forward, block shots. He's not a great shooter, but he's great around the rim. He's a tremendous dunker, shot blocker, good defender. And the only reason I didn't go with him is because I think he's going to be like around a 10 to 12 point per game type of guy because he's more of a defensive oriented guy. I look for him to get defensive player of the year. All right. So I almost feel like I should change Jay Mullins, but I'll stick with it. And then when I'm right, I'll say I told you so. All right. All right. So we'll move on to the Big South. And last year, High Point and UNC Asheville were kind of going neck and neck for a while. High Point pulled away at the end. And wouldn't you know, neither of them went to the tournament. Longwood, I believe, was the fifth seed. I think Longwood was the fifth seed and went to the tournament. So now Asheville, they've been relying on Drew Pember, two-time player of the year, two-time defensive player of the year. He's moved on to the pros. And Asheville only returns 3 of its 8 top players in minutes per game. High Point, on the other hand, returns 7 of 8. Longwood only returns 3 of 8. Winthrop, 4 of 8. High Point also added point guard Bobby Pettiford, started with Kansas, and he went to East Carolina. And they also added an unknown guy named Terry Anderson. Now, if you're familiar with Kamani Hamilton's game, Terry Anderson is very similar, strong in the defensive areas, but not a great shooter, good around the rim, athletic. And to me, this is High Point in a runaway.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Don't forget they picked up Demorian Williams as well from Texas Tech, who before he went to Texas Tech, this was a nearly 15-point a game scorer and a nearly 40% three-point shooter in this very conference of Gardner-Webb. So you bring back all these returners. You add Bobby Pettiford, who's got Big 12 experience, who's got AAC experience, which is a very good league, contrary to what anybody says. And then you add Demorian Williams, who is coming off 2 years in the Big 12, where obviously he didn't produce as much, didn't play as much, but he's now in a league where he was a really good player and a really big producer. So, and then Liam McChesney sat last year. He provides some more size behind Joslin Bodo. I think this team rocks, and I think and they also have some unfinished business. Really good first year under Alan Huss. They lose that game to Longwood at home. They did have that tournament at their home court because they were the 1 seed.
Wow.
So,
I didn't realize that game was at home.
Yeah, that was Big South. I thought they usually play neutral site. This was played at High Point's campus. So, yeah, I think there's some unfinished business here, but this team is absolutely loaded with talent. Absolutely.
And they also have the Keza Griffa. Giffa, who was averaged like 15 points per game last year.
Right. And although they lost Duke Miles, like they stood.
Right, he was their leading
up.
scorer, but Hamilton and Giffa and all were like over 14 points a game, I believe. So you keep two of those guys. You have Bodo, who's a big presence in the middle. Then you add Pettiford, Anderson, and the other guys you mentioned. You got quite a team here.
Yeah, this is going to be one of the best mid to low majors in the country, Rich. I think that's the trajectory they're on. Some unfinished business, like I said, with the home loss in the conference tournament where they were the high seed. Bring back a lot, bring in some production. Like I would imagine DeMaurian Williams still has a very good year here. Bobby Pettiford transfers down again. He has another good year. Or has a better year where like you see the Big 12 talent that he once was. So I think this team is awesome, and this will be one of the better. Spoiler alert, I think this is a top 3 mid to low major in college basketball. Very, very good team. They should run away with it.
Yeah.
By the way, how many years has Greg Gant played?
Greg Gant.
This has got to be like year 7. I remember when he first played at Providence.
This is it for him.
I think I was in high school.
He was active last year, but hardly played. So I mean, that's just something right there. I mean, Asheville wasn't a team that was dripping with depth, and Gant really. I mean, I know Pember was there, but you know, you could have played Gant and Pember together. You know, so yeah, I know he was a top 100 recruit, but he's no longer on our draft board.
Well, bottom line is he's first team all. I forgot that dude was still in college. Holy smokes, he's played a long time.
I knew it because I took him off our draft board recently.
He better have like a master's and a doctorate at this point. That dude's been, I'm telling you, I think I was in high school when this guy was in Providence.
No. I think I think he's probably in year 6. You know, because he got the extra year because of COVID, and I think he redshirted 1 year. Yeah. So
that might do it because 6 years ago I was in high school.
Wow.
Yeah.
6 years ago I started collecting Social Security. So in terms of Player of the Year in this conference, without Drew Pember, you know, it kind of opens things up. What are you thinking?
So I went with Kamani Hamilton. I think another huge year. I think you can, like, you certainly could make the argument that Keza Giffa could be in there as well. But I'm going to roll Kamani Hamilton, the big fella, former Power 5 guy at Mississippi State. I'm going to roll with him. You could honestly potentially take your pick at quite a few high point guys, but I'm going to roll with him. It's going to come from this team. You can take your pick of who it's going to be. I'm going to roll Kamani Hamilton.
Yeah. Kamani, we didn't discuss this with him when we interviewed him, but, you know, he's the best pro prospect in this conference. And the one thing that's missing is a consistent 3-point shot, you know, very much like the kid from Bryant, Timberlake. And, you know, with a 3-point shot, Kamani has the defense. He has the rebounding. He's not the greatest of ball handlers, but he wouldn't have to be. You know, he could, you know, if he could just be like a stretch 4, you know, or a small ball stretch 4, because I don't believe I think he goes about 6'8", maybe 6'9", but so I guess not too small ball. But yeah, and you know what I found intriguing was Terry Anderson from Lamar is so similar to him. I found that intriguing. So yeah. He's another interesting player I'm excited to watch this year. So now we move to the Big West, and I'm going to test Jake's memory because we both liked UCSB Santa Barbara last year, but we also, you know, last year we broke down this conference and we kind of predicted like the top 4 teams or maybe the top 2 or 3 teams, and I threw a team out there, and Jake said, I don't know about that. You remember saying that when I brought up Long Beach State?
Yeah. Yep. Hand up.
Now you gotta admit, I'm not one usually to give myself props, but I kind of have to. I felt like, you know, all right, you know, it's probably the only thing I got right last preseason, but you know. So anyway, I know we were high on Irvine, and Irvine, I think we probably predicted Irvine to finish second in that conference, or no worse than third. They ended up winning it because UCSB never really got their act together last year, and were a big disappointment. And this is a team that I thought Santa Barbara could have been a top 25 team, had everything played out right, but it didn't. And Long Beach was the team that actually made it into the 20. And did they beat Irvine? I remember watching that game when I was laying in the hotel where you abandoned me in pain. I was writhing. I was writhing. Oh, no, it was UC Davis, who was also very good last year because of Elijah Pepper. But I remember watching this and cursing your name and watching Long Beach State and Davis just battling it out. But they also battled, before they beat Davis, they also had to battle Irvine. And both of those games were very close. But Long Beach State has lost everybody that was, anybody who did anything for that team is gone. Meanwhile, Irvine returns, let's see, 6 of 10. They're one of those deep rotation teams. And so they bring back, and including friend of the show, Bent Luscheten, the German big man. And when I say big, he's big. And he's actually been a reserve, for most of the last 2 years, and still put up really, really good numbers. Question is, now that he's going to kind of be the man, how does that work out for him, in terms of, logging bigger minutes? We shall see. Will he be as efficient? The other team was really good in the conference was UC San Diego. They returned 4 of 9. Long Beach, 0 of 8. UCSB, 4 of 8. Hawaii, 1 of 8. UC Davis, 6 of 9, but they lost Elijah Pepper, the reigning conference player of the year. So that's huge. He is now playing in Australia, by the way. He signed to play in Australia even before the NBA draft. Cal State Northridge returns 3 of 9, not much coming back there. And the one thing I will say about Long Beach that they have to look forward to is they theoretically will have a duo of 4-star guards at, playing guard in Devin Askew and Ramel Lloyd Jr. Now, Ramel Lloyd Jr. Has basically been at Nebraska. I think he got hurt. He may have been hurt for the last 2 years. He is a big combo guard. He's like 6'6". Askew, of course, people who were Kentucky fans will remember he came in as like a top 30, top 35 recruit. Played okay, but wasn't outstanding. Then he went to Cal, or did he have a stop in between Cal?
Devin Askew was Kentucky, Texas, Cal.
Okay, Kentucky. Yeah, he didn't do great at Texas, and he was hurt at Cal, I think, for 2 consecutive years. So we got 2 guards that basically have spent most of the last 2 years injured, but they have a lot of potential. So what do you make of this conference, Jake?
Well, you're absolutely right that Long Beach got gutted. Now, they were the story of the tournament because of why they were gutted. Because before the Big West tournament, their athletic director told Dan Munson,
right,
you can coach until the end of the season, and then you're gone, no matter what happens. And all this guy did was bring him to the damn tournament and spoil my pick of Santa Barbara, which you're absolutely right. UC Santa Barbara, they never got it together.
And they had AJ Mitchell, a draft pick of Oklahoma City, and Johan Traore, who was like a top 50 recruit for Auburn. They had both of those guys.
So Long Beach was gutted this year. Reason why they were gutted, they lost Dan Munson, who's, athletic director, said, hey, coach till the end of the year. Don't matter how far you get. You're gone regardless. Bring them to the tournament. And he lose to Arizona, but the fact they got there was pretty miraculous. That was really the story. College basketball stories like that, that's what makes it the best.
Don't you think that happened, though, because they kind of doing it for their coach who thought that it was getting a raw deal?
Yeah, probably. But regardless, that was one of the best stories of conference tournament week. So Chris Acker from San Diego State at Long Beach State, replacing Dan Munson. Whole team's gutted. And a lot of these guys went to big-time places, too. Jadon Jones, Oklahoma. A.J. George, SMU. Babukar Traore, Louisville. Lassine Traore at Xavier now for Sean Miller. A lot of these guys went elsewhere. And they went to good spots, too.
Yeah,
So
they would have had a good team this year.
yeah, absolutely. So all those guys leave, and they're really left with nothing here. I mean, there's 6 transfers here. And ask you, like, never was a fan of him anyway, but with injuries, this guy's only played 19 games the last 2 seasons, Rich.
Right.
Only played 19 games. So hard to see what that is going to look like. Would imagine it takes Chris Acker, more time than this year to get this team competitive again. But he's coming from a very, very good program with very, very good values and pedigree in San Diego State. I want to get to UC Santa Barbara because I was very wrong about them last year. Now, although Johan Traore did put up numbers, the impact that Miles Norris had, he did not fill that, and it's big shoes to fill. Miles Norris is a fringe NBA player.
Yes.
And a very, very good player in the Big West. We played at Oregon, and then was at, UCSB. And then A.J. Mitchell missed some time with injury as well.
Yep.
They definitely
the
lost.
Start of the season, yeah. And then I think he got sick, too, in the middle of the season.
Yeah, so unfortunate that it never feel like it picked up and got off the ground because there was, Cole Anderson and there was Josh Pierre-Louis. Like, there was a lot to be excited about last year for UCSB. It never got off the ground. I mean, they dug themselves too deep a hole to get to win the conference regular season with all the games that they had lost early. So never kind of materialized for them. But I'm going to take him as my winner again this year, Rich. Having said all that, I'm going to take this team. I'm going to take UCSB to win this conference again.
Wow.
Even Swenson coming from Stetson, I think is a very, very good player to come in here and assume the big shoes to fill. That is the A.J. Mitchell point guard slot. You bring in Deuce Turner from San Diego. How about Deuce Turner? San Diego and Santa Barbara. I wish I was this guy going to school. Nice places to be. And then as Johan Traore leaves, you get Kenny Poto from Wichita State. So I do think they did a good job here kind of filling in where they had some guys graduate, or some guys transfer. But I think our guy, Ben Leuchten, friend of the show, is actually going to win Player of the Year. And although it's kind of tough on Irvine because, like you said, they play so many guys, the rotation is so deep. I think he's going to be able to put up numbers as the premier big on this team.
Right.
So I'm going to roll with Ben to get Player of the Year. And then I'm going to roll the Gauchos to bring it home and to win. I think these are your top 2. I feel like you could kind of assume that almost every year that these are probably going to be your top 2 in the West. So give me the Gauchos to bounce back and win. Steven Swenson's going to be a big time addition, but I think our guy Ben Leuchten actually takes home Player of the Year in this conference, Rich.
Well, I'm telling you, he's ultra efficient. But as I said leading into this, it is easier, especially for a big guy, to be ultra efficient when he's coming in and playing 15, 20 minutes game. Can he keep that up when he's playing 25, 28 minutes per game? We'll see. But definitely, especially a good offensive player. He'll and a good rebounder. He's going to and a solid shot blocker too. The question for the next level, because his efficiency kind of screams you looking at him, as a prospect, which is why we had him on the show. Foot speed. But we're talking about next level. It's not going to hurt him here, and it won't hurt them if they get to the NCAA tournament. Then you might notice it, that it's a problem. But they also have a nice wing in Devin Tillis, and they lost a really good player in Darian Saron to Stanford, and I am really high on this kid. He really impressed me last year. And I think he really has NBA potential. My pick for Player of the Year is Ty Johnson of Cal Davis. And I'll give you a peek at Ty's numbers last year. They were outstanding. He's going into his senior season. And last year, he put up close to 18 points per game, 44 from the field, 32 from 3, 77 from the free throw line. So the 32 from 3 could you'd like to see that get better. But he also brought down 3.7 rebounds and 3.3 assists and 1.8 steals, which is sweet. So, yeah, he's a stat sheet stuffer, point guard, has decent size, good athleticism. He's 6'3", 190. So, again, probably the best pro prospect right now in this conference. Unless Askew or Lloyd for Long Beach, live up to their potential. Boy, can you imagine if all those guys you said came back to Long Beach and they brought in these two guards to join, because most of those guys were bigs, who could rebound and block shots and score inside. And what I think Long Beach would have taken them to the next level is guards if they kept all those guys, but kind of a shame. All right. So, I, by the way, am picking Irvine. I like Irvine in this conference. They return a lot of guys. They have Loisheton and Willis. They're two best players. So besides Saron, who went to Stanford. All right, so we'll move on to Horizon. Horizon last year, it was pretty simple. Oakland won the regular season. I don't think we saw that coming. And Oakland won the tournament too. And then they went on to beat Kentucky in the first round of the NCAA tournament with the 3-point marksman whose name is Jake Golke. Is it Golke? Jack. And he's moved on to the pros. And they also had Trey Townsend, who was player of the year in the conference. He has moved on to Arizona. So Oakland only returns 3 of its top 8 players. Youngstown, who was up there in the running for was second place, only returns 2 of 8. Green Bay, 3 of 8. Wright State, 5 of 8. Milwaukee, 5 of 9. Northern Kentucky, 6 of 8. And Fort Wayne, 7 of 8. So the guys that were kind of in 5th and 6th place last year, but I think they both were slightly above 500, are the ones that are returning most of the players. Green Bay brings in the highest ranked freshman in the conference, and that's Jeremiah Johnson. He's a guard. He was number 144 in the composite rankings. But, for me, it's kind of a wide open race for who's going to win this conference and also player of the year. I initially had Sam Vincent, who was Northern Kentucky wing. He got hurt in December last year, tore his ACL. He was having a tremendous season. And I haven't really heard any updates about Sam. And so I was like, man, what if he doesn't play till December this year? What if he misses the first 5 to 10 games? So, so I have other guys I was thinking of, but I kind of like Northern Kentucky in this conference because when you think about that, they were pretty good last year. They're returning them pretty much the most of the top teams, and including their best player, Vincent. So I'm picking Northern Kentucky. What are you thinking?
I'm going to roll Milwaukee here.
Wow.
I'm going to roll Milwaukee here because you talk about all the returners they bring back, but also here, how about this for an interesting little story? So I remember when Queens College came in, they were playing LaSalle one of their first games, and I read up on them. I watched some film, and I was like, hey, these guys can play.
Yeah,
they're fast. Like these guys are good. The coach who got them to D1 is Mr. Bart Lundy, who's in his going into his 3rd year as the head coach of Milwaukee. As soon as Queens bumped up to D1, he takes the Milwaukee job. And although they have all these returners, he brings in AJ McKee, who is one of his guys at Queens College, who played the last 2 seasons there under Grant Leonard, to come over. And as a big-time scorer at Queens, I think he'll do the same in this conference. So I'm going to roll Milwaukee. A lot of returners, and I think this AJ McKee is going to take Player of the Year honors, Rich. Wow. I really think it is. So how about the Queens College connection of Bart Lundy and AJ McKee? And Milwaukee, that's it. Would this be their first tournament appearance since Bruce Pearl?
I don't know, but I do know they're losing BJ Freeman, who was going to Arizona State, right? And he was like an all-conference all conference player, and that's what kind of scared me off of them.
Rob Jeter took him to a tournament in 2014, twice actually. But Bruce
Okay.
Pearl 2005 got him to Sweet 16.
Wow. Okay, so that was almost before you were born. Almost.
Yeah.
So you don't like my Northern Kentucky guys. I just like, that they bring back, Keon Itajiri, who's a big man. They bring back Trey Robinson, who's a wing. They bring in Josh Dilling, who was a D2 star at point guard. At Northern State. And remember that school's name, because we're going to talk about another player from Northern State later on in the show. But so I don't know. Basically, there's not a lot of big newcomers, into this conference to me. I mean, like star-studded, no disrespect to McKee from Queens. And I would tell you what, Queens, by the way, they placed about 3 or 4 players at bigger schools, and I think one of their players, I'd have to look, but I think went to a really big school like Auburn or Georgia or something like that. I'd have to look on our list, but we have them all written down. But anyway, Queens, yeah, they're up and coming. But I just kind of like Northern Kentucky's depth. But I'll tell you what, if I'm wrong about Sam Vincent not being healthy by, like, say, January, well, you know what though? What did we learn last year? What's the one thing we learned last year? I mean, what's the hard lesson High Point learned? Or Asheville. You can't. No matter how well you kick ass in the season, you still got in these conferences. You still got to win those 2 or 3, 4 games in the tournament to get into the big dance. So that's why I kind of didn't shy away from Northern Kentucky, because I'm thinking even if Sam Vincent doesn't show up till February, all they got to do is win 3 games and they're in. So. A couple other notes though for Player of the Year candidates, since I didn't pick mine yet. So you went with AJ McKee, but I noted here that I thought the other candidates were Brendan Noel, the forward for Wright State, who's a stat sheet stuffer. The reason why I stayed away from him is he doesn't have those complementary guards that he had last year, and I think teams are going to be able to focus on him a lot more. So it's going to be a challenge for him. But I also love Fort Wayne's backcourt. So not only do they bring back a lot of guys, they bring back the best backcourt, in my opinion, in the conference, in Jalen Jackson and Rasheed Bello. Bello is the point guard. Jackson is the shooting guard. And I'm going with Jalen Jackson for Player of the Year. And as you know, I love to do, I'm going to read off a couple of his numbers. Last year, 16 points per game, 50% from the field, 41% from deep, 71 from the free throw line, which doesn't quite add up, but also 4.6 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 1.6 steals. Another stat sheet stuffer. And, but I think it's a wide open race for Player of the Year. But I'm going with James. And like I said, watch out for Sam Vincent.
Also, got to mention, we got to mention the Doug Gottlieb thing at Green Bay. I don't know how it's going to work out. That's one of the most interesting. Like, that's one of the more interesting stories, I think, in all college basketball this year. The way he thinks he's going to do it with, he's still going to do his radio show every day. He thinks he's going to leverage NIL through that. Like, it's going to be a very interesting experience to see how that works, because the guy's never coached before.
Doug Gottlieb is kind of an acquired taste, wouldn't you say?
Yes, I would 100% say that.
Yeah, kind of like wine that got opened up and left on the counter for several days, and then you taste it again, and you're like, boy, it's the only wine in the house. I'm going to drink this, but
that's what you want to call it, yeah. But it's going to be interesting.
That kind of acquired taste.
Yeah, this was like ultra baffling at the start because there's just no like head coaching experience. Like, what about like a low major? And the thing is, the timing sucked because you're seeing. You can even look in the next conference we're going to talk about is the MEAC. We're going to Donnie Lynn.
Oh no, not the MEAC.
the MAAC.
Because there is a
MAAC.
MAC. There is a MAC. So
But-
Jake is referring to the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference, so MAAC, and then there's the Mid American Conference, which is MAC.
Yeah, so apologies for going on a tangent here, but Donnie Lind takes over at Mount St. Mary's. Why? Because Dan Engelstad leaves to take an assistant or associate head coach job at Syracuse. Same thing happened here. Jeff Linder left Wyoming, which Mountain West is a great league, but Wyoming, do they have NIL? Probably not. Regionally, there's not really anything
I think Wyoming has got. Did you see some of the kids they brought in this year?
Well, it just had like the point being like he can probably get a pay raise and not have to worry about some of that stuff and like being behind in fan base support and budget and money and NIL and like obviously like the West Coast is a bunch of talent, but like they're not really, you know what I mean? But like Laramie is out of there on its own. So he leaves to take an associate head coach job at Texas Tech. I think he's making over $500,000 there. So Sundance Wicks goes to Wyoming, and then it was so late in the process that, again, you probably could have hired somebody else. I'm sure there's a bunch of mid-major, low-major assistants that were put the time in and were certainly worthy of this job. But, like, they took a swing here.
Mm-hmm.
They did. We'll see how it pays out for him. But, like, this is a very interesting experiment that Green Bay is doing. And he was able to get some talent. He got Isaiah Miranda. He got Donovan Santoro. We got Anthony Roy, who played at New Mexico State, believe it was.
Miranda of NC State, Oklahoma State?
Yeah. He got some talent.
He went to Green Bay? He's at Green Bay?
Yeah, he got some talent in there. Like Green Bay is going to be really, really interesting. I think this is the ultimate college basketball experiment, if you will.
Right. And like as I said, they have the best incoming freshmen too. I mean, this conference doesn't usually get top 200 freshmen, and this he's 144. I mean, he's not. He's probably borderline 3-star, 4-star, but still, that's an achievement right there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so one thing I appreciated about this conference was there was a number of players you could pick for Player of the Year, which really hasn't been the case for most of the conferences we've talked about. So now we'll move on to the Metro Atlantic. Quinnipiac won the regular season last year. St. Peter's, again, another conference winner, regular season conference winner, got upset. St. Peter's went to the tourney. Matt LeBlanc not Matt LeBlanc and friends. Excuse me. Matt Blanc of Quinnipiac was the conference player of the year. He has graduated, but I'm still rolling with QU here. But I'll get to that. Let me run over. Quinnipiac returns 5 of its top 8. Fairfield 4 of its top 9. Marist 5 of 10. St. Peter's 5 of 9. Ryder 3 of 9. You ready for this? Iona 0 of 8. Nobody coming back for Iona. Merrimack and Sacred Heart are new to the conference, coming over for the Northeastern Conference. They have joined the Metro Atlantic. Merrimack is the better of the two squads right now, and they return 4 of 8. The top newcomers in this conference, I would say one of them is going to Iona from Northern Colorado, and that's guard DeJour Reeves. A nice little scoring guard, may have been in the running, with Northern Colorado's history of always coming up with some star. He may have been the next guy. I think Coach Smiley is kind of now, with him gone, is kind of scratching his head. Who's going to be the next, Dalton Connect or St. Thomas? Other interesting players coming in is Zion Cruz. I don't know if you remember Zion. He was a top 100 recruit.
He was at DePaul.
Huh?
Yeah.
Played for DePaul. Last year, he was at junior college, Pratt Junior College. He is joining Ryder. And Siena has Reed Ducharme, who was a 4-star on Xavier's squad last year as a freshman, hardly played, if he played at all. I don't think he played at all. He decided to come over to Siena. So this is kind of an indictment of this conference, the fact that I'm picking Quinnipiac. And because I don't really see a team super standing out here, but the one player I really like in this conference is, as you saw, most of these guys are all, except for Iona, are all returning about half their roster, half the rotation. But the one, I think the best player in this conference is Amari Tice. And he is only a junior. And he started with Wolford as a freshman, played at Quinnipiac last year. He put up 13 points per game, 47 from the floor, 35 from three, 78 from the free throw line. This is a big guy. This is like a 6'7", 220-pound guy. Also brought down 6.9 rebounds. And 1.8 steals and 1 block per game. This guy, another stat sheet stuffer. We actually asked QU if we could interview him. And we probably asked about a dozen players, and we probably got responses for about 10 of them. The one that I definitely remember we didn't get was Tice. So he is so good. He's too good for this show. That's why I'm picking QU to win this conference and Tice to be player of the year.
And I'm going to agree with you, Rich. I mean, you look at the conference last year, like you had QU, so very late in the offseason. Baker Dunleavy left for Villanova. You're seeing general managers being big in college basketball now. Baker Dunleavy left the post of Quinnipiac pretty late in the process to come to Villanova and be the general manager for basketball. Is just seeing more of these positions hired. And in steps Tom Pecora. And then you had a coaching change. I believe it was Jay Young at Fairfield, and Chris Casey steps in. So you have two guys that are hired very late and really are interims. And all they did was make these two teams two of the best in this conference. A conference that Iona's represented 6 of the last 8 years in the NCAA tournament. And with Tobin Anderson coming in off the big upset, there was a lot of excitement about. But I'm going to roll with Quinnipiac as well. What a great story this was. They're going to bring back a decent amount. And last 2 years, going back to when Pitino was there, you want to talk about conferences that get absolutely ravaged by the portal. This is up there for one of them.
Yep.
This is up there for one of them. These teams get absolutely ransacked in the portal with everybody taking their best players. Basically, like, you can almost wipe clean the first, second, third teams, I feel like, of these. Like, if you have
I think
any
Fairfield
success,
got especially clipped this year.
Like, your guys are getting poached. I mean, look at now. Iona's was different under Pitino. But you look at St. Peter's, you have Corey Washington that goes to Wichita State. Merrimack, Jordan Durkak is going to Rutgers. Like, you look at some of the really good players in this conference, and they're getting poached. But I like what Quinnipiac has. Tom Pecora was a great story. Chris Casey was also a great story. And I don't think Quinnipiac's going to keep the good times rolling here and end up winning. I also went with Amari Tice. Now, I think Iona is interesting this year. I've been an Iona fan for a long time, and obviously uber successful program. But although there's a lot of excitement,
even before you were born, going all the way back to Jeff Rowland days.
Not that far. I definitely wasn't born yet.
No,
Maybe.
I know. I was your age when he was in college. But my point being, Iona has a long, rich history. It was even before Pitino.
Yeah, Jim, way before that. Kevin Willard and Valvano and Tim Cluse was great. But although there's a lot of excitement as well, it was a young Iona team last year. And then you mentioned they bring bag 0 of 8. It's a whole new team again for the second straight year.
Yep.
Kind of hard of what to expect. I think they're definitely a little bit older.
Mm-hmm.
Now you look at a Christian Winborn from St. Joe's who's wired to score, just didn't have a role with how deep the team was as far as guards went. And then, hey, welcome back to the MAAC Clarence Rupert, Philadelphia's very own, if you remember from that St. Peter's team. He's back in the MAAC here at Iona. So Iona will be interesting, though. I think they'll be older. Correct me if I'm wrong, but still, it's a brand new roster. So I'm going to roll Quinnipiac here. What a story they were last year. What a story they were last year. And again, it's great. You're a great story.
And Tice,
You still got to go to Atlantic City, which is a total dump, and win 4 games. You want to get in the tournament. Sorry. I've been there
the last time I watched a basketball game in Atlantic City, Terrence Strawberry was the best player on Temple, and they won it. I think they won the tournament that year, or maybe they. Do you remember Strawberry played for Temple? Maybe that's before your time.
If it was before 2000, it's before my time. That's for sure.
No, it was probably around. Yeah, you were probably just a little one. It's probably about 2005, somewhere in there. Yeah,
I think if you put the A10 tournament back at Boardwalk Hall, you have my attention.
Right.
Put it that way. But that's the only time I'll return to Atlantic City. I'm not going back otherwise.
All right. Well, the last time I was in that building was to see Louis C.K. So he didn't shoot the ball. All right. So we're going to move on to the MAAC, which is we got
conveniently we go from the MAAC to the M-AC. I see what you're doing.
Exactly.
There it is.
And this is a conference I am very familiar with. Under normal circumstances, they probably wouldn't be in this group where we quickly go through the conference, but Mid-American is looking a little weaker than usual. Again, poaching, is just hitting all these conferences. Akron won the regular season. Akron won the tourney. Akron played Creighton in the first round. They stuck with them for a half. Enrique Freeman had a tremendous game, but eventually Creighton pulled away in the second half of that game. Enrique Freeman was the player of the year. And he was recently on our show about a month ago. Since then, he signed his 2-way contract. He was unsigned at the time. So congratulations, Enrique. This conference, man, I think it's wide open. Akron only returns 3 of their top 9. Toledo returns only 4, but they also get Seth Hubbard from Western Michigan. So really, they're going to have 5 quality MAAC level players to start the season. Ohio 6 of 9. Central Michigan only 2 of 8. Western Michigan only 3 of 9. Ball 3 of 8. Bowling Green 3 of 8. And but Bowling Green does get Derek Butler from Central Michigan. Miami of Ohio, we went deep. I went deep because I really wasn't sure who was going to be in the running here. Miami of Ohio brings back 4 of 10. So nobody really stands out with who the numbers they're bringing back, except for maybe Toledo plus Hubbard, or Toledo's 4 guys plus Hubbard, and Ohio's 6 guys coming back. I think a handful of newcomers in this conference could win Player of the Year, including Ohio point guard Jake Pavletsky, who played at Iowa State last year, didn't get a lot of playing time. But the year before that, where was he before that? Was it Wolford?
Believe it was, yes.
Wolford. He had an unbelievable freshman season for Wolford. He shot almost a little guard, 6'2" point guard, shot almost 50% from the floor, 39% from deep, and 84 from the line. So this kid can score. He averaged 15 points as a true freshman and also almost 4 assists per game. So last year at Iowa State, he only played 10 minutes a game, so it's not even really worth, going over those stats. But I look for Pavletsky to get back to his usual ways. Also, Peyton Sparks went to Indiana last year. Left Ball, went to Indiana. He's back at Ball State. This is a 6'10", 260-pound mammoth of a man in the middle, and definitely going to give Ball State credibility on the inside this year. So, Jake, what do you think of this conference? There are a fair number of newcomers in this conference that I haven't been able to mention because I want to let you talk. But this conference looks pretty wide open.
Yeah, and again, another conference that gets poached a lot, and what a great story Enrique Freeman was being a walk on and then getting drafted. How cool is that? Last
Very,
couple of years, you
very
look at this
cool.
conference, it's like they had Ryan Rollins, and then Akron had Enrique Freeman. You look at Ohio with Jason Preston a couple years ago, like they're putting guys in the pros. Amani
By the
Bates at
way,
Eastern
Jason
Michigan.
Preston, I think, might be the best player in the G League who's not on a regular contract.
Yeah, like there's certainly a lot of talent here, and they put a lot of guys, quite a few guys in the pros. So I'm gonna go Ohio here, who I think is going to win. So naturally, this will be the year that Toledo breaks through and Todd Kowalczyk gets the Rockets in. But you look at who they bring in. You mentioned Jackson Paveletzky, Sharif Mitchell. There's another guy who'd probably be on my list for. Damn, that guy's still in college. I remember when he was at Creighton. Like, yeah, remember when that happened. So I'm going to roll Ohio here with returners, some good transfers, and Sharif Mitchell as well. It's got to be his fifth year at this point. Got to be fifth or sixth year at this point. So excuse me, Sharif Mitchell entering his sixth year. I thought he was fifth. He was sixth. But
And he's coming from Creighton.
yes, last year was his first year at Ohio. So
Right.
with a fresh start, ball in his hands a lot more. Started just about every game for the Bobcats. Put up over 13 points a game. Little under 33% from the 3-point line. Don't love to see that, but with the ball in his hands a lot more, I think that will go up just a tick. And the point guard on the team that I think will win, head of the snake, scoring a lot of points. I'll go Sharif Mitchell, player of the year. But I think you could maybe, I don't know, think you could take a pick of the litter of a couple of Ohio guys. I'll go Sharif Mitchell.
Right. Right. The reason why I shied away from Toledo is because some of their best players are like sophomores, at least in terms of upside, like Sonny Wilson, who didn't play a lot last year. I mean, he played, but he was behind two all-conference type guards. And they also have Javon Simmons, a forward, another sophomore. So I see the talent there, but I just don't know if they have the enough experience to go along with it. And so the team I like to win the conference is Sharif Mitchell's team, but that's, I love the combination of AJ Clayton and Pavletsky at shooting guard, point guard, wherever you want to put them. You're going to have two really good guards that have plenty of experience. And Clayton is my pick for player of the year. I mean, he is quietly one of the better players in the country. I mean, I know he's not like a big time scorer, but I think he will be this year. I think he's going to be up around 15, 16 points a game. Last year he was at 12. He shot 50% from the field, 40% from three, and that's on high volume. He averaged 5.5 attempts threes per game. Excellent free throw shooter, 81%. The one thing for a big guy, he's not a great rebounder. He averages less than 5 rebounds per game, but he does block a lot of shots at close to 2 a game. So I think Mitch, I'd love to see, Smith, or excuse me, Clayton. I'm getting all my names confused. Clayton rebound better. But other than that, there's not a lot to complain about, with his game, at least for the Mid-American. And I'm picking him as player of the year. A couple other notes I wanted to say about this conference before we leave it is there are two former top 100 recruits guards coming in from the Big East. That's Cam Kraft, who barely played last year for Xavier. He's going to Miami of Ohio. And Jalen Terry, who is a fifth-year guy, who's really never quite lived up to his potential. He was at DePaul. And coming along with him is Deshaun Nelson. And for Big East fans, they know Deshaun was probably like the steadying force on a god-awful team. But, he kind of brought it every, night in, night out. Good defender, good rebounder, not a bad shooter. So Eastern Michigan has been pretty horrible for the last, 3-4 years. I think they're going to start to rebound. So now we shall move on to the MEAC. what does the MEAC stand for again?
I think it's Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference.
Yeah, right. And last year, the regular season winner was Norfolk State, and I think they won it pretty handily, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just take a quick peek at the standings. Not really. They were 11-3 in conference, while North Carolina Central and Howard and South Carolina State were all 9-5. So Howard won the tournament and went on to the NCAA bids for, was that the first time in school history?
No, Howard's made it. I think they made it 3 times in the last 6 years.
Have they really?
Yeah, they went back to back. They played in the first 4 last year. Year before, they were the 16 seed. They played Kansas.
Okay. All right. And Norfolk loses player of the year, Jamari Thomas, who I believe is going to, oh boy.
He's going to South Carolina. Was originally
Right. I knew
committed
it was
to DCU, and then probably some dirty business there that he's down in South Carolina.
but I knew, yeah. But a good player, an interesting player to watch in the SEC. So in terms of who's returning, most of these schools, the only one of the top 4 last year that's returning the majority of the rotation is South Carolina State. Norfolk returns 3 of 10, Howard 5 of 10, and North Carolina Central 5 of 8. Personally, I like Howard to make it back to the tournament only because I believe they have the best player in the conference, and that's Bryce Harris. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Bring back Marcus Dockery as well, and then hey, a guy in Anwar Gill who I watch play a ton at LaSalle, who I think is going to be a nice kind of dirty work guy. I think a glue guy. He's a good on-ball defender, not a great 3-point shooter, never was, and he did have some injury flare-ups a little bit last year, and kind of something that's followed him around for a bit. But on-ball defender, strong dude as far as getting. He's a strong lefty as far as getting downhill and getting to the hole. DC native as well. Going close to going in, back home now to play in front of some friends and family. So along with Kenny Blakeney, being one of the best, if not the best coach in this conference, I agree with your point on Bryce Harris, who I am picking for player of the year as well. And I think they can go back to back and win 3 straight MEAC titles.
Right. They also have Dom Campbell, former Notre Dame guy, gives him a legit big. He's about 6'9", 6'10".
And they need the big because Seth Towns finally left
right.
college. That's literally a guy that's been in college since.
Oh my God. Yeah. He just had the worst injury luck of all time. I mean, I think he missed maybe three full years with injuries.
Yeah. Legitimately, Rich. This guy, not to cut you off, this guy, his first year in college. So keep in mind that last year was his last year in college. I graduated December 2022. He was still in college last year. I've been removed after 4.5 years. I'm out almost 2 years. This man's first year in college was when I was a sophomore at North Penn High School and did not have a driver's license yet.
Oh my!
I was 16. I just turned 24.
Yeah.
This guy was still
he started off with Cornell or Harvard?
He was
right?
a Harvard, Ohio State.
And he was a top 100 recruit and a serious, after, his first year or two, he was considered a serious pro prospect, but just injuries just piled up on him.
Yeah.
Bryce Harris, by the way, he's going to be a senior. Last year as a junior for Howard, 16.6 points per game, shot 55% from the floor, 38% from deep, 74 from the line. And this is the wing. So he's like a 6'4", 6'5" wing. He averaged 7.5 rebounds, 1.1 steals, 1.1 blocks per game, and for good measure, he threw in 1.7 assists per game. Another stat sheet stuffer, and that's why we're going with him player of the year. So we shall move on to the Northeast Conference, or the NEC. By the way, the NEC is losing, as we said before, Merrimack and Sacred Heart going to the Metro Atlantic, and replacing them are Chicago State, who finally found a home. They were independent for a number of years, and also Mercyhurst, Division II, moves up. And they have a kid who's been starring at D2 level, who I'm excited to see. His name is Jeff Plantis, I believe. I've never actually got to see him play. So I'm looking forward to other, yeah, right. But I have noticed his numbers for sure. Last year, Central Connecticut won the regular season, and just like in many of these conferences, they did not go to the NCAA tournament. Wagner went, or is that school named Wagner? Is that school owned by Mo and Franz?
Totally different because it's on Long Island. Not the same at all.
Okay. So Central Connecticut returned 6 of its 9 top players. Fairleigh Dickinson, another contender for the championship, only returns 3 of 8. Wagner only returns 4 of 8. Of the top 10 most productive players in this conference, all of them are gone. Top 10 are all gone. And I put here in the notes, I said that guard Jordan Jones, who was the 11th most productive player in the conference of Central Connecticut, is probably the safest pick for player of the year, and neither of us chose him. So what are your picks? Who's going to win this conference, and who's going to be player of the year?
Yeah, I'm going to roll with Wagner. They represented the conference last year, and they dealt with a slew of injuries. They could hardly practice, and then they ended up winning the first 4 game as well. But with all that, I don't think they're going to have absolutely horrific injury luck like they did last year. And look, this was a feisty team. The couple years that Donald Copeland's been there, this is a very, very feisty team, and they really embody how he is. I believe it was his first game, actually. He was in the Leah Core Center with Wagner. It was one of Bashir Mason's last year's, or I think it was Donald Copeland's first. They went into the Leah Core Center at Temple and won an overtime first game of the year. Like, this has always been a feisty team with Donald Copeland. I like the makeup they have. They fought through the injury adversity last year, and I think they're going to get there again this year. Javier Esquera's back. The big fella Keontae Lewis is back, and that's who I'm going to pick for player of the year. So give me Wagner's Seahawks once again with a local guy in Donald Copeland.
All right. I'm going to go with Central Connecticut. As I noted, they returned 2/3 of their rotation, including what I consider the logical pick for player of the year in Jordan Jones. However, I'm not picking Jordan Jones, and this is definitely a homer pick. I am going with Jalen McGlone, Division II player from East Stroudsburg, my alma mater. All right. I have seen Jalen play in person. This kid is a legit D1 athlete. Now, I'm not saying he's could play for North Carolina, but he's definitely got plenty of athleticism for this conference. Last year at East Stroudsburg, on a very deep team, he only played 24 minutes per game, and he averaged 12.4 points. He shot 53% from the floor, 39 from deep, 78 from the free throw line. He basically put up numbers for a guy who would play 30 minutes per game, and he did it in less than 24 minutes per game. And one of my favorite stats for him is 2.2 steals in less than 24 points per game. So kid's very efficient. He'll dunk on you. And he's a guard, by the way. He's a shooting guard, but he's also a pretty decent passer. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and go with my a player from my alma mater. All right, so we're going to move on to the Ohio Valley Conference, and boy, this conference back in the day, sometimes was in the running to get 2 teams in the tournament, but those days I think are long gone. This is when Belmont was good, and Belmont was even good last year, but Murray State was also in that conference. But now Morehead State is kind of the dominant team, and they are the team that won or represented the conference in the NCAAs last year, though Little Rock won the regular season. Little Rock, nobody in this conference is returning anybody large numbers. Little Rock, only 2 of 8. Tennessee Martin, 3 of 8. Western Illinois, 4 of 8. Tennessee State, 1 of 8. The top newcomer to me appears to be Little Rock wing, Jonathan Lawson of the famous Lawson basketball family. Chandler Lawson just graduated and is going to play pro ball somewhere. He actually may have signed with somebody in Europe already. You may remember Diedrich Lawson, who was a star, an All-American type player at Kansas. Maybe he was an All-American. But anyway, Jonathan is a former 4-star who began his career at Memphis, had, I think it was didn't play much. I think he redshirted as a freshman, had a decent sophomore season. Then he transferred to Creighton looking for more playing time, and he got less playing time. So now he's at Little Rock. So that's my pick to win the conference. And one of the other reasons is I really like KK Robinson, a former Arkansas guard who put up tremendous numbers last year for Little Rock. And if memory serves me, he is a top 100, maybe top 150 recruit. But I'll look that up while you give me your thoughts, Jake.
Yeah, I'm gonna roll Little Rock as well here. Some serious, big time D1 experience here with Mikal Mitchell coming back for another year, Mwani Wilkinson, who used to be at LSU, Jonathan Lawson, who you touched on, Jordan Jefferson returns, KK Robinson's in there, used to be at Arkansas. A lot of big time college basketball experience and pedigree from these guys. So I'm going to take Little Rock. Morehead has been very good in this conference as of late, but Riley Minnick's out the door, as well as Preston Spradlin, who's moving on to James Madison. So he's out. You look at UT Martin, pretty good last year under Ryan Ritter. He's out to go to Mercer. So Jeremy Schulman's in there. So some coaching shuffling going around with 2 of the top teams in this conference last year, I think opens the door for Little Rock to get there. So I went Little Rock, and then I went Jonathan Lawson to come in and surprise a little bit after, not doing as much as he was hyped to be, like you alluded to when he came out of high school. So
right.
Jonathan Lawson, Player of the Year, and that Little Rock team gets over the hump here, goes to the tournament.
Right. Lawson was the 99th recruit in his class, and KK Robinson was the 60th recruit in his class. By the way, another top 100 recruit is joining this conference, and that's Brandon Weston from Rhode Island, who's going to Tennessee State. So I just wanted to give you KK Robinson's stats. What a great year he had last year. Let's see here. He averaged 16 points per game, 42 from the field, 32 from 3-point, 84 from the free throw line. Gets to the line a fair amount, which is good because he's not ultra efficient in the other 2 categories. But 5.6 rebounds, 4.3 assists, and 1.2 steals. That is a very productive guard. And he's only 6 foot. To bring in 5.4 rebounds is quite impressive. By the way, you mentioned Riley Minnick. He was the Player of the Year in this conference, and he showed out well at the combines. Didn't get drafted, but he's on a Exhibit 10 with the Spurs. So to me, that's good. If the Spurs are one of those teams, if they sign you as like an Exhibit 10 or a two-way guy, that's not such bad news. It's kind of like getting signed by the Heat. They're usually a good judge of talent. So that's bodes well for Riley Minnick's future. So we're both going with Little Rock, and we're both going with a Little Rock player for Player of the Year, just different Player of the Years. All right, so we'll move on to the Patriot. Last year, as always, you'll have to tell me the numbers on how many times in a row Colgate's won this conference. Colgate won the regular season. Colgate won the conference tournament. Braden Smith, Colgate's point guard, won Player of the Year. And Colgate returned 6 of the top 10 players in this rotation. However, they lost Smith to Gonzaga, and they lost their other top 2 guys to graduation. So they're really missing their top 3 players, including the Player of the Year in the conference. The other contenders are American. They returned 7 of 8. The same story with Boston U, 7 of 8. Bucknell, 8 of 9. Lehigh, 7 of 10, and Lafayette, 7 of 10. So I don't know. Maybe that's not a good sign in these days of poaching where these teams were able to maintain most of their players. So what are you thinking here, Jake?
So this is kind of just like Vermont, where that was great that you mentioned everybody that had left. I'm still not going to take anybody but Colgate here. So here's my question to you, Rich. Last 4 years, Colgate represented this conference all 4 times in the NCAA tournament.
Okay.
You have any idea what their record is?
Over those 4 years?
The last 4 years.
Oh, I would say they probably, I don't know how many wins they have, but in terms of losses, they probably in 4 years in conference, they too have probably lost less than 6 games.
They have lost 6 conference games the last 4 years.
Okay.
6 straight first place finishes. You take out the COVID year, and the year before that, they were also the representative here. Rich, 60-6 is this record the last 4 years in the Patriot. I don't care that they lost all the guys that they did. I am going to take this team again. Kind of a weird situation with Braden Smith going to Gonzaga. Now, he's a Seattle guy. He's a Washington guy. So go to a big-time program. Sit behind 2 veteran guards, Nolan Hickman and Nemhard, and then you assume that role in the WCC. Seems like it's a good idea, but just for like, hey, imagine a Player of the Year is going to transfer up and he's going to redshirt. You know what I mean? Just the thought of it.
Well, now that Steel Venture's gone, I started. I wonder if they're going to rethink that. And maybe,
on the wing, they're probably fine. They have Caleb Battle. Who's
inconsistent as hell.
Yeah, but I think for WCC, he's gonna light some people up. He is he
could light up some NBA people. But
but he's you know what I mean. Especially you're gonna see this dude drop 38 against Portland or somebody. You're gonna be like, oh, I remember him. Yeah. But even with Braden Smith leaving and a guy like Keegan Records, I'm still rolling with Colgate here. They bring back the big fella Jeff Woodward, who's actually from the town over from me, and was a public school kid and was awesome. He went at Jalen Durn and gave him a really good game his last year, or second to last year. He was a really good high school player. And I know it's a lot to lose, and you lose your 3 leading scorers, but Matt Langle, he's just figured it out with these guys. He just has. And their offense is going to be good. They're going to shoot the ball well. They're going to be highly efficient. Even with the players changing, you just know that's how it's going to be over Matt Langle. And he has dominated this conference, which has been an impossible thing to do with the academic difficulties and now the transfer portal. And this guy they just keep dominating year after year after year. So although there's a bunch of teams that bring back a lot, and I know your pick. I hate to spoil it here, but I don't hate your pick of American. They played Villanova tough last year in the opener. They played Villanova very tough at the Finn. For, a half to maybe 25, 30 minutes of that game before it got away from them. I like Bucknell long term. This team wasn't great last year. Now, granted, I say that, and then, I saw them play at Penn, and I was like, well, they're still a work in progress. They really weren't that good, and Penn blew them out. But what's crazy is, like, that Bucknell team went all the way to the semis and almost beat Colgate at their home arena. They almost ended the streak. But I think Bucknell long-term with John Griffin, I think is definitely a play, is definitely a team to, monitor going forward. But that was a lot of rambling for me. The point being, just like it's basically just like the America East. It's Colgate's until somebody proves otherwise.
I understand that. I do. And I just closed the window. I wanted to reference. Yeah, because, we noted here that all these teams, all the teams in the top half of the conference are all returning a good majority of their squads, especially American and 7 of 8, who is my pick. Now, Colgate 16-2 last year, and then you had 4 teams at 10-8, American, Boston U, Bucknell, Lafayette, and then Lehigh is the team who actually played in the conference championship game to go to March Madness against Colgate, and they were 9-9. Why American? Why am I doing this? Well, as I mentioned, Colgate's losing their 3 best players, and I believe the best player left in this conference is Matt Rogers of American. This guy goes 6'9", 220. Last year he averaged over 16 points per game, shot better than 50% from the field, 37% from deep on 4.3 attempts per game. So he's not just taking 1 or 2 threes a game. He's taking over 4 a game. Then he shot 73 from the foul line. That's solid. 6.2 rebounds, 1.6 assists. His steals and block numbers are not great, but they'll do in this conference. The point of it is also American plays a methodical style. And, so they can be kind of a tough matchup like a Virginia. And I'm not a big fan of slowing the ball down, but they are the slowest paced team in this conference. At least they were last year. So, they can present some kind of matchup problems, I think, with Rogers and whatever. And what we know is, one slip up, and no matter if Colgate can go 16-2 again, but if they lose that just one game, it's over. So I'm just I'm thinking Colgate's dominance at least takes a 1-year hiatus. All right, so next up on our list is the Southwestern Conference, commonly known as the SWAC. There was only one coaching change, and I don't believe it was of any of the top teams. The regular season champ was Grambling, and they also won the conference tournament. The player of the year was Ken Evans of Jackson State, which was actually my preseason pick to win this conference last year. At the time, I didn't know Deshaun Ruffin wasn't going to be playing for Jackson State when I made that pick, and he was supposed to be their star. So looking at what's going on this year, oh, by the way, Ken Evans transferred to Florida Atlantic, who we will be talking, that conference, the AAC, we'll be talking about in the future. So, in this conference, so many players are not coming back. It's much easier and a shorter list to say who is coming back. Also, they didn't bring in a lot of high-level transfers, and they brought in not one single top 300 freshman. So any freshmen we're talking about here are most likely going to be top 300 freshmen, and they don't have one on our freshman list. So, Jake, who do you like to win this conference?
Yeah, I'm going to roll Grambling here to go back. This time, if they do, play in the 16 seed matchup and they end up winning, they're not going to have to go through Zach Edey this time at the size disadvantage that they were at. But yeah, I think Grambling's going to run it back here Yeah, you're right. I mean, the cupboard is pretty bare here as far as returners go, and the fact that they bring three at least back. I mean, even that's a big number for this conference. And quite frankly, Rich, I mean, you look someplace along the low majors that we're talking about, and that might even be a big number for that as a whole. I mean, these low major conferences and even some mid majors just get absolutely gutted
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
time of year, and your team can look so much different. So, although Deshaun Ruffin comes back for Jackson State and Mo Williams, who I think will be the player of the year in this conference, Grambling with their returners at the very least. I know it's only three, but I'm going to roll with Grambling to go back to back here in a conference that is going to look drastically different than it did last season.
Yeah, as you said, Grambling has the most key returners returning, and we have 3 out of their top 8 returning, including a Player of the Year candidate in Antoine Burnett. But I like Grambling also, and I like Deshaun Ruffin to win Player of the Year. Are you going with Player of the Year Ruffin as well?
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
think he's going to put up a lot of points for Mo Williams, who has a point guard himself and a very good one at that. Who I love playing with in 2K. I mean, he'll have a guy teaching him what to do, and as he did last year, put him in another position. But that guy's going to put up a lot of points, and I think Jackson State's going to be right up there to win. Although I think Grambling will win, so I'm going to go Deshaun Ruffin Player of the Year, but I think Grambling goes back to the NCAA tournament this year in a one bid league.
Right. And for those of you not familiar with Ruffin, he was a top 60 recruit. He's on the small side, even for a guard, but he's pretty dynamic. And he never quite got his shot he had some injury troubles at Ole Miss and maybe some other troubles with the coach or something. It didn't work out when he did return from injury. But I believe he's a former McDonald's All-American, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, that would have been about 3-4 years ago. But he's never really had a shot. So, to be a full-time, the man type of guy. So I think he should break out this year. All right, so now we'll move on to the Summit League. And the Summit last year, they too, the regular season champ and the tournament champ was the same team. That was South Dakota State, and the player of the year was from South Dakota State, Zeke Mayo, who has since transferred to Kansas. The problem I see with South Dakota State this year is of their top 5 players, 4 of them are gone, including Mayo and William Kyle. Great shot blocker, very athletic, a dunking machine in the paint, and he transferred to UCLA. They do bring in, though, Oscar Clough, the huge center from Washington State. But the team I like in this conference is North Dakota State. And before I let you talk, Jake, I'm going to say that originally I liked Kansas City. But then when more thought, I went with North Dakota State. I also like North Dakota. I think this is a 4-team race. What do you think, Jake?
Yeah, I'm right up there with you. I think Kansas City is definitely interesting. I know their big guy, Alan Mukeba. I just saw Greg Campy, now that he's at Oakland, do a little film study on him, how he thinks he can be a really, really, really good post player and dominant guy if he could stay healthy in the Horizon League. So you see that like Alan Mukeba is gone, and a guy like William Kyle is gone for South Dakota State. And here's the thing, I think you're absolutely right. I like the top 4 here. Especially you look at how much North Dakota State and North Dakota are returning, and I know you can look at as well as Kansas City, and South Dakota State's the team that returns the least out of them.
Yeah.
And I like your North Dakota State pick, but I like South Dakota State as well. I know they lost so much, but I think Oscar Clough is really going to dominate this league as a big guy and is really going to have a big year. So I'm going to take Oscar Clough to win Player of the Year. I think right away he's going to dominate and be very, very good in this league. And because of that, I think he's actually going to get South Dakota State the bid here. Would be cool if we had a North Dakota State, South Dakota State Summit final, which I believe they play at Sanford Pentagon.
Yeah.
Right in the Midwest, but I think Oscar Clough's going to be huge. quite literally and figuratively. I think he's going to be massive for South Dakota State. He's going to put up a lot of points and produce a bunch, and I think he's going to get him that bid.
The reason why I like North Dakota State is because they've returned 4 of their top 6 players. And they bring in 2 interesting recruits that are both bigs. One is Patrick Bath. He's a redshirt freshman from Drake, and he was number 241 last year. Not a household name by any means, but he's a big with potential. And the other big they bring in is D2 Jackson Money, and I know D2 stats can't compare to D1 stats, but this is a 6'10" guy who last year averaged over 21 points per game, over 8 rebounds a game, 3.6 assists, and wasn't so great in the block department, only 0.9. So that's not really good at the D2 level. Year before he had 1.1. So he's definitely not a shot blocker. But the other thing I find interesting is he's a 36% career 3-point shooter, averaging 5.5 attempts per game, and free throw line 81%. So really, this guy looks more to be like a power forward. But if he can shoot at 36%, at the D1 level, you got yourself a hell of a weapon there at 6'10". All right, so that's gonna wrap up this show. We still have some more mid-majors to cover, and Jake and I will be doing that. Maybe some of the other guys will join us, but probably not, because they're not sick like we are. So we'll be talking about more mid-majors, and when we get all done, which will probably be the end of next week, we're gonna rank like our top 10 mid-majors, and Gonzaga doesn't count. They're not a mid-major. West Coast Conference isn't a mid-major conference anymore, if you ask me. So any final thoughts, Jake, before we wrap this up?
All good. Need college basketball back in my life. Happy to do this for the sickos. Talk some mid and low major hoops. These are like the most electric conference tournaments sometimes. It's these small conferences that nobody really watches. Is like the conference tournament week. This is what you want to watch. Are these leagues?
I agree. It's great basketball. It's competitive basketball, for sure. All right, so we'll wrap this up. If you want to send us a question, folks, please do. We haven't gotten a mailbag question in a while. You can email it to admin@hoopsprospects.com. We also take questions on social media, on Twitter @hoopsprospects, on Instagram @thehoopsprospects, and on Facebook @hoopspros. As always, I want to thank Jake for joining us. I always love it when Jake's on the show, because we can talk nitty-gritty college basketball about players that nobody else knows. But this is for serious. These next couple of weeks are definitely for serious college basketball fans. And if you ever miss an episode, you can get caught up at hoopsprospects.com. Remember, we got a double episode this week. Not only this episode, but also our triple interview episode from all schools that we talked about today. And we'll be back next week to do more mid-majors, and then we're going to be jumping into the bigger conferences all the way up to the start of the season, which I believe starts on November 4th.